what you're contributing to. Now I want to talk a little bit about customer journey because this is something that's really important. Ultimately, this is where we said the difference between the marketing, the top of the funnel, and the growth in the lower of the funnel. So you've probably all seen this before, the pirate funnel, the growth funnel. Has anyone not seen this before? Alright, I'll go through it. Basically, with you guys, it's going to be a little bit different. In your case, your retention is going to be after your revenue. Because I assume that you can't cancel your lease, right? Once you have it?
Or you can,
Well,
it'll cost you.
big buyout.
Okay, so your revenue comes before your retention.
Yeah.
But this is based on the SaaS, so the buyer funnel is based on the SaaS model. The SaaS is clean and predictable and trackable, but at the end of the day, all these things move. Also, SaaS also is quite difficult to take into enterprise level and actually make a lot of money out of, but still. Awareness is basically you're driving awareness. People are becoming aware of your product. This can be website traffic, this can be walking past a stall of yours at an event. If you have a shop, it's somebody walking into your shop. Awareness is when they first become aware of you as a company. Acquisition is when you can say they're no longer a visitor or an aware person, they're a user of some sort. Maybe they're a very far level of lead. In our case, we measure trials and demos. Anyone who has a trial or a demo, which is kind of like the advanced form of sales call, is an acquired user. That's from that moment we call them users. Now in your case, you might have to redefine that a little bit. So if it's somebody who, I don't know, engages very heavily with your brand but doesn't lease anything yet, you can say that maybe they're a user. It really depends, because there's no fixed definition for any of these things. It's going to differ from business to business.
It's done in demo right, for example.
The configurator, done the configurator, started the configurator.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's somebody who's using your product. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're a customer yet, but they're using your product. Then you have activation, right? So activation is really important because I kind of differ from a lot of people in growth. I don't think that growth influences retention. Because I think retention game is mainly product and customer success and customer support. If you look at a lot of customer success, how it's developing, growth and customer success fight on who does what. Retention emails, who does retention emails, who does churn busting. In my opinion, 90% of our retention input is here, is activating the user. We activate the user and activated users retain. So now activation is about giving someone what they call the wow moment or the aha moment. It's essentially the moment anybody kind of gets your product. When the user suddenly understands, okay, now I understand why people talk about this. Now I understand why people use this. Now I understand how this is going to make my life easier. Now there is no necessarily one wow moment. Now the more simple your product, the less wow moments you might have. But different users can have a different aha moment. In our case, we have non-tech savvy users. Their aha moment is the user experience and the user friendliness. We have small startups who are budget conscious, so their aha moment is when they see that the pricing is actually very inclusive, no feature discrimination, unlimited users. We have different kinds of aha moments for our product. You might also have yourselves different aha moments. But the important thing is, the sooner the user has this light bulb moment about your product, the more likely they are to convert, and also the more likely they are to retain. Because a wowed user, an activated user, also has a much better management of expectations going into the product itself. Retention then, I mean in your case retention is kind of twofolded. You've got kind of like your retention, which is you don't want them to cancel, but then again it costs them so much, so you have a natural anti-retention incentive there. But in your case it's that once their lease expires that they actually sign up for another lease. Does that happen? I don't know if you guys have numbers on how often that happens. Is that a common thing?
In the market it's like 40%.
Yeah. So this is really important because the activation is going to be directly linked to that. Because if the user has an unrealistic expectation of what leasing a car is going to be like, they might get disappointed by it. And then when it comes to the end of their lease, they won't renew. So activation is something that also sales contributes to, which is also very often ignored. And sales needs to manage expectations. Some sales teams or some salespeople are really like to sell as much as possible and say this is going to be this, but if you oversell something, you're going to overactivate. If you overactivate a user, there's a chance that they're going to get disappointed once they get into the product or service. So all of these stages need to be optimized very carefully. And then retention is really about making them come back, but I really think that the things that tend to move the needle in retention is going to be customer success, is going to be customer support, is going to be the experience of the product or service. Yeah.
We should stimulate or guide that process.
It really depends. I mean, there is no fixed answer. But if you don't have anyone in customer success, growth can own this. We owned this until we got a customer success manager. If you don't want to have a setup with customer success, I mean, you guys have a holacracy, right? So it's a little bit different anyways, but in terms of departments, you just need somebody who owns it. So retention is going to be two sides. It's going to be the product side, and then there's going to be the communication side. Everything that supports success, that's all communication side. So make sure that somebody owns that. If you need someone in customer success, get someone in customer success. If you want to keep that in growth, keep it in growth. We have 82 features, and companies ranging from 79 a month to thousands a month. We need customer success because we need personalized onboarding. We need personalized support. We need 24-hour support. It's the only way that we can keep our customers happy and actually keep an edge over the competition is a very strong level of service. Now this is going to change from company to company.
Are there some guidelines to discover your aha moment, or is it differs per company?
Well, the most basic guideline is asking people.
Ask people.
Ask people, what was the first moment you decided you wanted to use Recruit? You know, what was the first moment? If you have a trial, for example, or, you know, what was the, just talk to people. The thing is, what we started creating, which was really helpful, we created this thing called the best friends of recruiting. Essentially, people who really like us, who really like our product. Again, it falls back to this part, which is our brand is so strong with these people that they would choose us over a superior product.
So
That's the ultimate goal in branding. If somebody would choose you over a superior product because they love you as a company, that's a really nice goal. Like imagine all the people who will choose an Apple over potentially superior Microsoft, you know, Windows computer.
for Trigger, the aha moment was when you got when you followed 10 people, right?
Yeah, but that's the problem. So that's I think the difference. That's the metric.
Yeah, right.
The you know when Facebook says follow 10 people within 7 days, then you're activated. It's not that that metric is your activation. That metric is just the easiest way that they've managed to measure when you're activated.
Indicator.
The activation of Facebook is, oh, I'm sharing shit with my, well, nowadays no activation, Facebook sucks, nobody uses it anymore. But other than that, the activation is when you go, wow, this is really cool. And then you have to ask yourself, what metric best represents that? And now depending on what goals you have, and this is why I say everything on paper needs to be brought into practice, which is what we found out is, what is the activation for recruiting? Well, ultimately, the ultimate activation is when somebody gets a candidate in the pipeline. But there's many other activation points on that way. So you need to differentiate between what you can call like soft activation, like early indicators that they're getting activated, and hard activation, which is when they actually go like, wow, this is really cool. Yes.
Yeah, I think just to tend to like, I think our like wow or aha moment, I think it's two. Like it's one when people are actually able to close a contract fully online. But secondly, more important, I think is more broader funnel, is it's WhatsApp. It's like there's not another leasing operation in the Netherlands that actually does WhatsApp. Like, and for some people, it's like, but that's why you're different. You know, like it's more servant, it's more personal, it's more. There's like a more like human interaction than having an email and being a number.
Because our salespeople use WhatsApp.
Yeah, WhatsApp. Yeah.
And that can be one of many activation points. So in our case, we know the activation is, so we have a lot of users who when they see the Kanban pipeline, so what you can do in Recruity is when you hire, you have like this Kanban, kind of like Trello board effect where you can move your candidates. People see that and be like, wow. People in the Netherlands see that and be like, yeah, I've seen a million Kanbans in my life. People in France go like, this is mind-blowing technology, I can't believe this design. Because the French market is behind, and that's how it is. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not criticizing the French, I'm just saying the French market, our market in France, doesn't use ATSs. Whereas in the Netherlands, most of the time, they're switching from another solution to our solution, whereas the French market is switching from Excel to us. So we have to have completely different activation rates. So you need to really understand what are the kind of little wow moments, what is the ultimate activation. For us, we decided to measure and there's no true or false. It's you need to see what is the thing that needs to happen to maximize all of these numbers later. And if you use a tool like Mixpanel, for example, you can actually, we use Mixpanel Predict, where it essentially what it does is it tracks all of our events, and then it uses a machine learning algorithm, and I know that word gets thrown around like crazy, but it does use a predictive algorithm to say what has the highest correlation, forward-looking, the highest correlation between 12-week and 24-week retention and an action. And what we found was that in the first 12 weeks, the action that was most highly correlated with upgrade and retention for 12 weeks was inviting a user. Right? Because we realized that when they invite a user, they start collaborating and they start seeing the collaborative element of our tool. But over 24 weeks, it was no longer inviting a user. It was setting up a career site and integrating it onto your domain, because that created stickiness. So you need to see what are the moments in your customer journey that most strongly correlate later down the line. Now, if you have the hard data, that's great. If you don't, work with soft data, work qualitatively. Talk to users, ask them. We have about 20 users who love Recruity and who we talk to, and we can just ask them honestly, hey, we were thinking about building this like this, what do you think about this? And they will be honest with you. And then you don't need to worry because you tie them really closely to your brand, and we reward them all kinds of different ways. They get first access to features, they get first access to betas, we give them special information and updates. When we organize events, they all get free invites. So we tie them in as like our informal, user-centric advisors to what we do. And we always start with them. If we then see a clear direction, we then explore with a wider user base, and then we try to go deeper, because hard data tells you what's happening. You look at the hard data, you look at the metrics, it tells you what is happening. Soft data, qualitative, talking to your users, tells you how and why. There's two really big differences. So you need both. There's not one better than the other. So you can see, okay, building a career site or filling out certain elements of the configuration has a higher correlation with closing, but why is that happening? And that's when you have to talk to the user and get the information firsthand.
Can you do that digitally? So ask your customers for
Yeah.
quality data but via
Yeah, both.
filling a form? Or do you need
Do
to
both.
call them?
No, do both. Do both. We do everything. We call them, we do digitally, but once in a while we also do kind of UX sessions in our office where you invite 10, 15 customers and we say, hey, come in. And we try to incentivize it. So we'll say to a company like one of our customers, Level Up Ventures, we work closely with them, they said, oh, we just hired 5 new recruiters and we use your system. We'd love if you gave us like a personal onboarding. We said, how about this? You come into a session for 2 hours, we give you a 1 hour personalized onboarding from customer success, and then you give us 1 hour UX feedback on what you've had as an experience with the tool. Building relationships is super important. I'm going to go into this in detail later, but building strong relationships is everything. Same thing, we do SEO. Our biggest backlink hack ever was asking all of our customers as head of content to include us in their blog articles. 30% of them did it. Our DA bumped from 57 to 62. Building relationships is super strong, super important. Any other question?
So you talk about the best friends of recruiting. Is this what you're talking about, or do you have any other examples?
So the best friends of recruiting is separate from this Level Up example because that was just a one-off where they asked us. But we also sometimes organize things where we say, hey, do the customers want to come in? We want to show you guys the new features. You can give us feedback on that. So we do things in person when we think it's going to be super valuable. We have UX people who go into the offices as well and ask. Because they feel like they're being looked after. Like most users will say yes. Very often they will say yes. It's a bit different if you're a B2C center, it's going to be a little bit different, but you also work with a lot of businesses, right? So very often if you're showing an interest in improving their experience, especially the more they invest, the more likely they are to say yes. So we call users very often, we send NPS surveys, although NPS surveys are, I'm not the biggest fan of NPS as a whole, and also if someone's having a bad day, you can get a way less good grade than when they're having a good day, it's just a fact. So this is why I think it's important. We look at the hard data, look at the numbers, see what is happening, where are the gaps, and then we try to zoom in on the gaps. We make lists of assumptions, what do we think are causing these gaps, and then we talk to the best friends of recruiting. But remember, even your best friends are going to have a different bias than the people who have zero affinity towards you, but it's a starting point. So then we talk to our in-house recruiters involved and our hiring managers, say what do you think is causing this, then we go to the best friends, and then we expand to the wider audience. And then expand to the wider audience depends on how important it is, how urgent it is. Our customer success handles that side of things, which is either we email them, or we send surveys, or we even meet with them directly. And we have 2 kinds, which is really like goal-based user research, which is when we see a gap, we're trying to fix it. And then we also have general rolling user research, which is where we're trying to find things that we might not have noticed if we'd looked at the metrics. Because metrics can be deceiving. So, what we noticed, for example, is when we were looking at the predict module in Mixpanel, we found out that when people were clicking the support button, if they were never clicking it, it correlated quite highly with churn. Because when people weren't clicking it, they weren't really using the product. But when people were clicking it all the time, it was also highly correlated with churn. Because if someone's clicking the support button 1 million times a day, it's because they don't understand what the hell's going on. And that's why it's important to always understand the context to all your metrics. And we found out that when they click it 4 to 8 times a month is the perfect correlation with, that gives you information, but you then have to talk and explore and understand the context to really put the hard metrics into a context. That's really important as well, because not everything on the surface is, you know what's happening, but understanding why it's happening is super important as well. So that's why we have rolling feedback and also targeted feedback as well. Once you have your activation game on, your retention game on, you want to make sure that you're closing revenue, so this is going to involve sales a lot. So if you have a pure self-service model, this is all growth. Most companies that want to get really big abandon self-service as the only focus after a year or two. You know, HubSpot started self-service. They have huge amounts of sales now as well. It's just how it is. If you want to break into the upper echelons, if you want to break into bigger clients and bigger customers, you have to have sales. If you have sales, that's going to be super important. This is where your alignment is going to play a big role. And then finally, referrals. Referrals are super important as well because you want your users to refer other users. So customer success is going to be involved. Sales is going to be involved in terms of how you manage the expectations. Account managers, account executives, customer support, product, service-focused things, all of this matters. I mean, technically, you know, finance and sales will both, finance and legal will both contribute to revenue as well. So it's important to think about this also holistically and not just within the growth department. And then referrals, of course, the better the experience, the more likely people are to refer. I think for us now it's like 28 to 30% of all customers come through referrals. And this is really important because all departments follow the same. Now, I didn't include operational stuff in here because it's involved a little bit everywhere depending on what your business model is. But every stage of the funnel has multiple departments involved. And sometimes you're going to notice, oh shit, our revenue rate seems to be, or let's say retention seems to be a problem. There could be something you can fix internally in the growth department, but probably not. Probably, if your customer support isn't actually being helpful, that could be a big churn causer. If your customer success isn't proactively tracking metrics that are associated with churn and proactively reaching out to customers to figure out how you can solve their problems, that could be causing your churn. If your product's breaking and there are bugs in it, that could be causing churn. If your legal process takes ages and people can't get the documentation they need before closing, that could cause a lack of upgrade to paid or lack of conversion to paid. So it's really important to always ask, because people always say like, what the hell is growth? Who's the head of growth? Is he the head of everything? No. Like, growth is done by the whole company because you're trying to make money as a company, right? You're not a charity. Even if you're a charity, you're trying to grow a number of donations, trying to grow a number of impacts, number of projects. Ultimately, your goal is to grow. So everyone's involved in this. The difference is that for me, growth owns the metrics. Now, if you get to a really big company, you might even have a data analysis department that does this, but generally, growth owns the metrics. So my job is to look at the whole customer journey, see where the gaps are, and then see, can we fix this from within the growth department? Or do we have to go through all the departments and really find the gaps and fix it together? More often than not, it's the latter.
What does ownership mean? Because we define a metric, well, the owner of a metric, what else is a circle within the holacracy?
I'm not a holacracy expert, so...
Well, basically, let's say we have departments and each department owns its own metrics. Is that a blocking thing for growth?
No, because you don't own all the metrics.
Yeah.
You own the metrics of the customer journey. You basically own the conversion from this to this, from this to this, from this to this, from this to this.
Yeah.
And we're going to go into metrics in more detail afterwards, but you have output metrics, you have input metrics. So you have the metrics you're tracking, and hundreds of metrics that contribute to that metric.
Yeah.
So here, in activation, we're just tracking activation rates, the various activation rates. Now, the metrics that customer success is tracking, or like here in retention, the metrics that customer success is tracking, there's hundreds of metrics. We don't track those metrics. We track the surface level metrics, the performance metrics. If we then see that the metrics aren't performing, we then go, okay, let's go one level deeper, one level deeper. And if I get to a level where I say, there's an issue in customer success, then I go to the head of customer success and say, we've noticed this happening.
Yeah.
And then the customer success people go into their metrics. And then we actually align and we figure out what the best solution is. So you don't own all the metrics. No one person can own all the metrics. Everyone owns their own metrics, but kind of the health of the customer journey is something that growth owns in our case. But you can also change it. I mean, none of this stuff is set in stone. You know, there's no one way to do it. It's just that we found that for us, the thing is, the growth department tends to be the department that's involved in most of the customer journey as a department itself. Because we're involved in all of these stages, our goals are directly affected by other goals. So if we have a goal with monthly recurring revenue, we are directly affected by what sales is doing. So we have to own those metrics and talk to sales about those metrics. Same thing with traffic, same thing with anything around there that we're actually focusing on.
Thank you.
No worries. Now, one thing I think is really important is understanding your users. So this is a nice thing. Everyone knows the growth funnel. But this one I found to be super useful. Now, I made this myself, but I used a lot of examples as this, which I call the decision-making journey. Now, users go through a general journey when they're exploring your product. This is kind of like the labels you can assign to people throughout the journey. But the decision-making journey is different. People make decisions, every single step here has multiple steps. Because acquisition is not one thing. You have to go on the website, you're going to read about it, you're going to maybe compare with other services, you're going to Google, you're going to read some blog articles, and then you're going to start filling out your configuration details. But so it's not one thing. So this is really based on our business model, but you can track this, and it's going to be a little exercise. We can do this quickly on paper, so to do it in practice. The first thing that happens is that a potential customer engages with your brand. So there is no intent yet. You don't know if they want a Tesla. You don't know if they want a car. You don't know if they're interested in this. You don't know anything. All you know is that they have become aware of Mr. Green. Maybe they saw you at an event. Maybe they met one of you at a meetup. Maybe they saw it landed on your website. Maybe they read a blog article or saw a video on LinkedIn. Could be 100 different things. But they've engaged with your brand. If people haven't engaged with your brand yet, they're not in your sphere of influence at all. The second thing that happens is education. The user becomes aware of the problem. Now, when you're creating content, when you're creating processes, it has to map this decision-making journey. So you engage with the brand, then you start getting educated on the problem. Now, what is the problem of your users? Well, I want a car, could be the most basic problem. I want an electric car, is a more advanced problem. I want an electric car, but I don't have enough money to buy it right now. It's an even more complex problem. You need to understand what are the various pain points or problems your users have, or customers have, or potentials have, and you need to be able to address all those points. So for us as well, it becomes more complex as we go along. Hiring is difficult. Hiring is difficult because we don't have enough people. Hiring is difficult because we don't have enough people and we don't have the tools to compensate for the lack of people. Hiring is difficult because we don't have enough people. We do have the tools, but the tool isn't user-friendly. There are so many layers of problems you can have. So that's the education part is really important, educating the market. Next, once the person becomes aware of the problem, that's when they start researching solutions. Now we're going to go into this in more detail, but you're not just competing with other leasing companies, you're competing with swap fees. You're competing with everything that gets somebody from A to B. Now Uber doesn't compete with Lyft, they also compete with trams. They also compete with walking.
With Tesla?
They also compete with Tesla to do so. So if somebody is leasing a Tesla, they're not only judging you as a leasing company, they're also judging Tesla.
Never go
So-
to a movie on a date, man.
Of course. Very standard, bowling all the way. But ultimately, this is super important, that they need to adopt and really understand, okay, all the value, and then retention, expansion, and advocacy when they start advocating, becoming your biggest fans. So this can be mapped directly onto here. But it's also a way more representative approach to when we're writing content, or when we do email drips, for example. We always do engage, educate, research, list. We call them pre-MQL, we call them information qualified leads, IQLs. We want to get them to sign up for a Charles Security blog, you sign up to an email list. The first email you get is tons of exclusive content. Like top 10 list of this, 12 tools you can use this, and stuff we don't share anywhere else. Because then, you engage with the brand, you get a great experience with the brand. Wow, these guys are awesome. Then we educate on the problem in a subtle way. And then the email after that, we then present the solution. But the email after that is again giving value, because the value is what keeps them in the list. And in between getting these little boosts of great value, you're also educating solution, educate solution, problem solution. And that way, we look at them as cycles, and we see how many people convert in cycle 1, cycle 2, cycle 3, cycle 4. So this is an example of how you can apply this into practice. So again, understanding people is vital. I'm not a big fan of personas. I think personas are a little bit BS, because it's like, cool, your average user is Joost, who's 42 and works for a bank. Doesn't tell you that much. And on the weekends he likes to go sailing, and he loves Tesla, and he's a big fan of Elon Musk, and his opinions on politics are this, and he earns this much. It's only limitedly, like, the stuff that's really useful is probably obvious. You just talk to any salesperson, they'll give you that information. What I really like is the jobs to be done framework. So we still make personas, we still make, the name Betty, who's 25, and a recruiter, all this kind of stuff, but then we try to tack this on top. What are they trying to achieve? What is the main job? What is the functional and the emotional job? So the jobs to be done framework is based, do you guys use the jobs to be done?
We're going to start
You're going to? Okay, it's really nice because it explains this.
Maybe you have to explain what the job to be done.
I will
What the
explain.
idea is.
I will go. The idea is that ultimately, when you're selling a product or a service, there is a job that needs doing. The user has certain goals that they're trying to achieve, certain things that they want to do. And these goals are not all simplistically set next to each other. You have functional goals and you have emotional goals. So somebody wants a Tesla because they want to get from A to B, but they also want a Tesla so they can tell all their friends that they have an amazing Tesla. Those are two completely different goals. They relate to the user completely differently, and you can trigger them in completely different ways. And then you have always the main job, and then the auxiliary jobs that go with it. And I don't follow this framework one-to-one, because it can go very, very deep, and we haven't found it to be necessary, but you can do. So you need to really understand functional, emotional, personal, social, what are the general goals that they're trying to achieve. In our case, their main job is hiring people quicker, cheaper, and better, getting the best people in. The functional job, though, is that they want to do it with less hassle, less manual work, less clicking around, less messing around with the system. Ideally, a great recruitment software is one that you don't really spend that much time with. So why, for us, tracking active users is not always great, because if you're spending 12 hours a day in the system, maybe something is bad. Maybe you're struggling with it. So we look at the functional job. The emotional job could be something along the lines of, I want to have a sense of success within my job. That can also be a functional job, but it can also be an emotional side, which is I want to have a certain sense of success. I want to reduce the stress load I have per day. Again, the more niche and B2B you are, the harder it is to address these emotional, personal, social ones. But you guys are working with a product that has strong emotional connections, has strong social connections. So these are the things you can explore. But it's ultimately, mapping this out is going to help you understand this. Uber competes with Lyft, but also with Swapfeeds and also with Mr. Green.
Do you know the story of the milkshake, the job to be done from the milkshake?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
From McDonald's?
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Oh.
You want to share it?
Yeah, sure. It's, the people who wanted to see what was the job to be done from the milkshake. And actually the job to be done was that in traffic, you want to do something.
Yeah.
And the best product who makes a job to be done is just sitting there and having something. That's actually a milkshake and not coffee or something else, because it's something which is very vigorous, it's big, it holds for a long time, it stays cold. So the job to be done is actually having something for 45 minutes.
Yeah, because McDonald's saw suddenly rise in the morning for their
Yeah.
milkshake sales, and they wanted to explain why do they do it.
That's a good example. I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And yeah, I think that's why the jobs to be done framework is so interesting, because you will find that you're not going to find that many people that you can fit into 4 boxes on profile-wise. People are different, and even if you can, how much information are you going to derive from that? But really understanding what they're trying to achieve, and also like the stuff around it. That's not that maybe even the user's not necessarily conscious of. That's why you have to do user research and ask the right questions. Yeah.
So you would say like tag the jobs to be done, so like every, let's say like user persona, because like everyone has a different job to get done, right?
Yeah, so we made out like 5, 6 different profiles,
Yeah,
depending on the
like-
size of the company, the role, and these kind of things. And then we made different jobs to be done
Alright,
for.
cool.
Right. And we thought that was quite useful. But again, our industry is a little bit different. We have 80 plus features. There's tons of competition. The roadmap for what you have to build next is often already there, because the competitive landscape is so fast and already there. But in a lot of cases, it's going to be super useful. It's also going to explain to you why is somebody going to debate between Uber and Swapfeeds. That doesn't make sense in New York, but it makes sense in Amsterdam. Thank you very much. So I have a Swapfeeds because I don't want to Uber about all the time, right? So they connect in a lot of different ways. A lot of people ditched Uber and switched to Lyft because of all the brand issues around Uber. So it's important to find a balance between those two. So I'll give you guys a little exercise. Also gives me a chance to get a quick breather for a second. And I think it's useful. So I want to give you the choice, because I know some of you have done the growth funnel, and this is not something you have to do in depth and stuff. You can always pursue it further at home or whatever in the office. But maybe this is a quick, just in case you have any questions and stuff, to map out Mr. Green's growth funnel. If you've already done it though, do the customer decision journey. So think about different ways. So engage, user becomes active with the brand. What are the ways in which users tend to become active in your brand? Come up with 2 or 3 ways. Educate. How do they get educated on the product? Do they read general sites about leasing? Are there forums that are popular about the stuff? Or are you producing content for it? So in every stage, try to think about what is currently happening and how can you leverage it. Do you all want to do this one, or do some of you want to do this one as well?
I'd like to do this one.
This one.
Yeah.
All right.
I like to do the other one.
Okay. Do you know this by heart?
Not by heart. Wait.
Okay, because I don't have a slide, but I'll show you.
I can write them down.
Yeah.
Yes.
I do wait for you.
I'll put this one on here. But I can actually, you know what I'll do? Problem solving
Yeah,
as
puzzle.
finest.
Gewoon,
Share.
ademen is lastig. Ik ben heel snel buiten adem. Dus gewoon een trap op of zo, dat is goed. Maar voor de rest, ja, ik voel me niet slecht of zo.